This is Maddie. What's up?
Yeah.
Hey everyone, happy weekend wherever you're at. If you're new here, my name is Maddie. I am an IFBB pro and I am the head coach over at Team MPowered Fitness. If you guys have been watching me for a while, welcome back to my channel. So excited to have you. If you know me, you know that if you head over to my IG page at Madsmichiefitness, I'm going to reach out to you. I'm going to hound you. I'm going to get to know you because I want to make each and every one of you my best friend. But this week, on this week's YouTube video, we have brought on Dr. Shannon, and Dr. Shannon is a doctor of physical therapy. I reached out to her on Instagram, much like I reach out to a lot of you, and she has a really, really cool story. And along her journey as a bodybuilder and as a doctor of physical therapy, she has gained so much insight and so much wisdom that I felt like it was going to be, I was going to do you a disservice, do myself a disservice to not get to know her better and to not share all that she has to offer to this community. So without further ado, wherever you guys are at, I hope that you're having a fantastic weekend, and I hope that you enjoy the next hour and all that Shannon brings to the bodybuilding community. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Maddie. I am the head coach here at Team MPowered Fitness. And this weekend, we are joined with Shannon. And today she's going to just be sharing, a ton of wisdom and insight. She actually has her own podcast that I will link down below. But yeah, we're just going to kind of dive in here. I've got a couple questions for her and just want to share her wealth of knowledge with all of you all. So without further ado, do you want to kind of introduce yourself and talk about what you do and maybe some of your highlights of your career and career as a competitor as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's like one of the really cool parts of social media is just by being friendly and social, you really can make new friends and meet new faces. So I'm just really happy to be here today. Thank you for having me. So yeah, my name is Shannon Ahern. I am a full-time physical therapist. I also have my podcast, like you mentioned, Doctor in a Bikini, which that has been going on for about a year. And then I have been competing, at least officially, since the beginning of 2022. I've always been active. I've always been involved in some sort of sport. I was a dancer, and I actually specialize in dance medicine. Yes, I love it. So I love that. I love what I do. There was a period of time where I didn't love what my reality looked like and what I was doing. So ultimately, that's what guided me into the sport and what got me interested. I actually used to say I would never, which is a strong word for me, I used to say I would never do a competition ever. I used to live with a competitor and I was like, no way. But I think when you know your why and you have your own why, it makes sense to you. And that's where I finally was in life, that I needed a reason. I needed something to get me out of bed every day. I needed a goal. And yeah, it's been history ever since. I've loved it. And now it's this whole brand. It brings me joy. It keeps me as a person, not just a provider. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for providing that. You touched on so many things already that I'm like ready to jump on. I've had a lot of conversations lately with girls. This wasn't even one of my questions for you as of yet, but a lot of conversations with girls. You talked about the benefits of social media. And certainly, when I get a new follower on social media, no matter who they are, where they're coming from, I like to introduce myself and I like to find out how they found me.
Mm-hmm.
But I certainly would argue that I have not leveraged social media in the healthiest way for myself throughout my entire competing career. I was talking with a girl on social media just a couple weeks ago who shared with me that, she was really struggling with the idea of even stepping up on stage months down the line because she knew that she had stretch marks. And I had asked her, who are you watching? Have you ever been to a show? Because if you go to see a show in person, you would probably find that a lot of those women, have proudly bared children and are, wearing their marks of honor, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's not a judging criteria, but so often, especially as a novice competitor, I remember going on social media and looking at girls like Laura Lee and Jen Dory and Issa and thinking, wow, I'm so far off.
Yeah, that's such a valid point. I think it's so funny because I think I go through phases where I really appreciate and have a healthy relationship with social media. And there's times, especially depending on, I mean, every season, every prep is so different. So let me put that out there too. Even for people that are beginning, the lessons always continue. There's always something that is challenging, something you're learning. And last year, social media was a huge battle for me. I had to mute a lot of things because it is hard not to compare yourself. And until you've learned that for yourself, it can be hard to draw that line on social media and say, oh, but her glutes are so great, or look at those boulder shoulders, and what about me? And someone said something to me one day too, which maybe it's not the best reminder, but it's valid with social media and the superficial parts of it is we put our best foot forward on social media.
For sure.
Every single person that you are admiring, they have something that they're probably admiring about you, but they're not posting what they're insecure about unless they're just choosing to be very open, which is great. So I think keeping that in mind too, that everyone on that screen is human and we all have something that we want to improve on. So thinking that someone like, and I've been there too, I've watched Laura Lee's posing, I'm like, oh, look how flawless she is. And I'm like,
Right.
how does she keep like her hands so relaxed? And I'm like, Shannon, you're doing it again. Stop.
Yeah. Well, we're sitting there and it's not, it's no harm, no foul to us, but we're looking at it through the lens of who are we comparing it to? We're not comparing Laura Lee to Shannon. We're comparing Laura Lee to myself.
Right,
when
right.
you're looking at people on social media, and a lot of times what we lose in that comparison is that objectivity, right? Laura Lee has been competing for a decade or more.
Yes.
And that is reps in the tank, right? So it's one thing to leverage our models, or even if you're a novice, to leverage pros as I admire X, Y, and Z about their journey or their routine or their physique. Right. But it's another when you're using that to compare yourself to it if you're not on the same playing field. And even if you are, I just find that, there's a lot of girls that other pros even who I've looked at now that I'm a pro, and I'm like, wow, but her core is just so dry. But my coaches remind me, like, this isn't an ab competition.
Right,
So
right.
sometimes even the things that we're comparing, they're not even valid bases of comparison.
Mm-hmm.
It's like maybe she has great glutes, but maybe in the eyes of Sandy or Tyler, she's disproportionate.
Right.
So
yeah,
know that you're also not an IFBB or NPC judge when you're scrolling through Instagram.
Mm-hmm. No, and that's such a valuable lesson that will continue to give someone longevity, not just in the sport, but just in life, because it really is so easy to get caught up in the details of what you're not doing, what you don't look like. And that's not going to help anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I think no matter what, say if someone was insecure about, and I've been there, so I'm speaking from experience, you're insecure about, let's say, core, because I've been there as well, my core control.
Yeah.
And I could, like my last big show, I could just say, wow, Amateur Olympia was so fun. That was such an accomplishment. Or I could fixate over the fact that I bloated and that my core didn't look how I wanted it to and ruin that whole experience for me. I mean, I could have placed, and then if I'm still focusing on what I didn't do, then all that hard work and that achievement of just getting there that day, then that's robbed from you. So yeah.
Well, I even did that. They had the one picture of me at Irving, and it was like the picture that everybody was posting, and I was holding the trophy above my head. And transparently, the only thing that I saw was that I let my belly loose. And I didn't even, up until this very moment right here and now, I didn't even think about like, wow, I probably robbed myself to some extent of the experience of just kind of soaking in and being present there. because I was so fixated on that one thing about me. And we are our own harshest critics, but it's also important. You're absolutely right to appreciate the journey. And more importantly, when we're looking at things through a lens of comparison, we're also creating competition with other women, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. Right. So I've been guilty of it. And I've alluded to this very example in previous YouTube videos, but Shelby Reed is one of my teammates. And going into nationals, I knew she was going to be in my height class. I was stalking the crap out of her. And long story short, I met her at nationals. I kind of had a come to Jesus moment with myself, realized it does no good to place yourself in these boxes of I'm comparing, apples and oranges, and we're back to back essentially. And instead we should face each other and come together and support one another. And now she's our assistant coach. So it just goes to say, like, this sport is so much better when we're a community and we're uplifting and we're supportive of one another. But with that being said, you talked about a recent experience of yours, which is one of my questions. So we're just going to kind of hop out of order here.
I love when that happens.
Yeah. But you had talked about your achievement, and in one of your recent podcasts had talked about how like winning is not all that it's cracked up to be. So would you share what happened at Amateur Olympia and kind of draw upon that very experience? Because I think I have some to share too.
Yeah, no, so I appreciate that you looked at that, because I actually did an episode on that after I performed really well somewhere. And by really well, I mean, objectively speaking, like what people think over when I say really well, they think placing, right?
Uh-huh.
Well, I can't tell you how many times I've stepped on stage and have not won an overall or won first place, more times than not. And
Sure.
I think that it can be really easy to value what you place, because even when you're done with a show, people don't always talk about this, but when people who aren't in the sport or your loved ones are invested and they want to know how you did, when you go back to work that first day, everyone says, how'd you do?
Mm-hmm.
And usually that means, did you win? And unfortunately, on a superficial level, that's how success is viewed, is how did you place? And those who have been in the sport or have heard anything about the sport, it's very subjective. And I think whether or not we're a new competitor, a seasoned competitor, one of the things I've had to learn is, because I'm a very emotional person and I'm very hard on myself, I had to learn how to define success for myself with the help of my coach. And with the start of this year, in fact, I appreciated this. We had a touch point. We were on a walk together and we helped Sally. She asked me, what does success look like for you this year? I want you to think about it, go home and write on your next check-in. And of course, not placing related. And I just wrote what I wanted to see, not what the judge's feedback was going to be. I wanted to write on there what I saw. So I had my own personal goals about how I wanted to feel, what, maybe how many shows I wanted to do, whichever, just my personal goals. And I think if you take the time to be honest with yourself and think about what success means to you, and you're not allowed to mention placing, then those experiences will be much richer because you did it for you and your reasons. And so Amateur Olympia, because you asked about that specifically, I wasn't even supposed to do that show. So
me. Yeah.
Kind of going off topic, but I guess in a nutshell, my year last year, anyone who knows, was the most chaotic year. I said I was going to do 3 shows. Well, LOL, I did 4 shows, decided to overachieve. Basically, what had happened was I qualified for Amateur Olympia when I did that episode about how winning didn't mean anything to me at that time. And that's kind of a hot button way to put it, but I qualified. So I said, you know what, let's just say I did it for the experience because that's what counts. And I just want to say that I did it. So went to Orlando by myself. My coach wasn't there. I had no team members with me. It was just me and my new husband. We had gotten married that same month. So I was in prep while planning the wedding, while getting married. And then less than a month later, we were on a plane to be at a show. And It was such an experience back there. Just like every show, it's different than what you expect. It's quite literally never the same. Lots of overwhelming factors, things I couldn't control, things that happened physically I couldn't control, and of course, placing. And being the emotional person I am, I got off stage and I cried.
Yep, been there.
I thought I failed. I thought that I looked XYZ. And I mean, we got to the hotel room and I was hysterical. I mean, it just needs to happen. And I think part of that for me, it's a cathartic thing. All the things you've been working towards have just been pent up inside. But that was a really good lesson for me, again, because you learn these lessons and you learn them again differently on what did I do well? What did I overcome this year? I made it here, which was more than I expected. And once I was able to get in that headspace, the things I couldn't control really didn't matter at the end of the day. So that was the whole matter thing.
What you touched on there is like a deepening of the lesson. So something that I walk a lot of our athletes through is these, I don't know if, you believe, I know that you believe in like the universe and like more than just, things happening by happenstance. But with that being said, I'm a firm believer that throughout life, whether you're a young student or you're in middle school or in high school or in college, the same lessons will present themselves. Personally, and being transparent here, one of the lessons that had presented itself all throughout my upbringing and, younger adult years was that there are no shortcuts to anything. And I had told myself that I had learned the lesson and grappled with it multiple times, but I really never had a deepening with the lesson. And something that I try to cultivate and make my athletes and even remind myself of and make us aware of is that lessons will continue to present themselves somewhat as whispers all throughout your life until you're ready to have that deepening. And finally, when you are, they've likely became shouts and they became bigger on a grander scale, right? It's like you steal a cookie and then later on down the life, later on in life, you're robbing a bank. It's like these lessons are only going to get bigger. Eventually it's going to be shouts in your face until you say, finally, I get it. I'm willing to take the lesson and to learn from this experience. And it sounds like your experience was very much like, you had that whisper, which was, okay, define success for yourself and put that kind of like into motion, but you didn't really actually have to practice it and grapple with that lesson until the amateur O. And I can relate in many aspects with that very thing, because I would say some of my most successful shows are shows where I didn't place at all. And it's mostly because I had gone into the show with a different goal in mind. Yeah. I think a lot of times when we even set a stage date, right? Like I'm going to do that show and it's 6 months down the line, you're already starting to narrow that funnel, if you will, about your expectations, right? You're starting to get a little bit more articulate about what you're expecting of yourself. Yeah. And then the pressure only builds from there, the more closely and the more articulate you get with those expectations. For example, I think one of the reasons why I did so well in Irving, and I didn't come to this realization until now, was because I had no plans to do the show. And I'm not saying that's how every competitor needs to be, but I do think that it's wise to not necessarily have this like set in stone plan, right? Because just like you could hop into a show, you could also not be ready for a show. But if the expectation is that you're going to do that show, then the second that you don't do the show because you're not ready or something comes up, maybe it's a good opportunity, right? Maybe it's an engagement or a pregnancy, like an oh shit thing. Right. If that comes up and it's something that you could actually really enjoy and it could be such a beautiful time in your life, now you're feeling like you failed yourself because you had this show. And so we put a lot of barriers on ourselves when we kind of set in stone and put in motion what's going to happen. My goal for Irving, I mean, it was ripped out underneath the rug of mine 7 weeks out from show. I was like, we've got 7 weeks and I'm in the thick of an off season to pull this off. And I didn't know how it was going to get done, but I didn't go into that show thinking this is my one and only chance to get a pro card. I don't even know that pro card was really in my vocabulary. In fact, I think if anything, I didn't expect to get it.
Yeah.
I truly had gone into that show thinking, you know what? My coaches believe in me. We've never done a prep before. We're looking at doing a show sometime next year in the spring, and this gives them an opportunity to kind of run a test run with me. And it removes so much pressure.
Right. Yeah, I think it's tough because when you think of competing, people say, oh, you have to be so disciplined and regimented, which true, but you also have to be flexible, which is the complete opposite. And that's somewhere in the middle there is where the happy place is, because to your point, you have to be open to opportunities. You have to be open to change and things that are out of your control and rolling with it. But then, yes, you do have to be strict enough to stay true to you and your goals, but understanding that whatever the plan is probably not going to be how it's executed 100%. And that's hard to let go of because naturally we just want to be successful, whatever that means to us. So when something threatens that, we're like, oh no. So, and we've all been there. I think no matter what, first show, 50th show, it's always going to happen.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I talk with our athletes a lot about this term that I've it's not, I didn't coin it, but I say our spheres of influence, right? Or our spheres of control. And so often, whether you're a lifestyle athlete or you're a competitor, we anchor into and put so much energy into ruminating on these things that we can't control. Well, my fiance lost his job. Well, my mom's in the hospital. Well, I accidentally measured out 6 more ounces of chicken. Well, I mean, that's not an accident, girl. You know how big 6 ounces of chicken is. I got my car broke down and I wasn't able to get to the gym. And we allow that to take root and allow us to spiral downwards. Well, we are self-confirming humans. And you have the choice in that very moment to allow every other action to confirm your bias that you just internally strum up, which is, I can't do this, or maybe it's not meant to be, or this is not the right path for me, whatever it may be. You can create a slew of actions that are going to confirm that for yourself, or you can step back for a second and take inventory of your energy, recognizing that we all have limited amounts of energy, and say, you know what? This is the amount of energy that I have, and taking off this piece of it and giving it to something that has no control isn't serving me. So while we talked about not having a set in stone plan, not putting yourself in this box, I do want to harp on and emphasize the fact that there are things that are within our control. And it is our job to show up each and every day and make it a point to execute to our best possible, show up as our best possible selves. Track your food, drink your water, get your cardio in. And if you're not ready to commit to that extent, then you probably shouldn't be entertaining a show.
Yeah, no. And honestly, get your mind right too. I mean, that's something, obviously, to an extent, there's things that, it's deeper than just get your mind right, but being honest with yourself. What are my needs? How am I right now? Can I handle a commitment? How are my relationships? How are my finances? Am I okay?
Yeah.
Those are things that are very, very important checkpoints all the time, but especially when you're looking to make a big change in your life or dedicate a lot of your life to something. I mean, you have to make sure that you are prepared on all levels, to the best of your knowledge, at least.
Yeah. Well, and I think before I ask you another question that came up in my mind, when you were talking about defining success and kind of marrying that idea of what is success to your why, I think can be really beneficial. And when you just ask the question of am I okay? it made me think about, I've worked with athletes who tell me, I've gone through a very long weight loss journey and I want to like shave off the last 20 pounds and I want to compete. And they're really using a prep as a weight loss journey. Mm-hmm. And I think that there can be a lot of disappointment actually, as opposed to just going through a conventional fat loss program that's a lot healthier, number one. And number two, you're not being put up on stage and judged, and you're not being placed up against other women. And so I think it's important that people hear that when you ask the question, am I okay? This doesn't mean that you're not okay if you want to do it for the purposes of weight loss, but you should really evaluate for yourself if that is your why, maybe not competing. Because I think losing 10 more pounds the healthy way or going through a fat loss journey can actually be a very gratifying and prideful experience. But if you're up on stage and all of a sudden you get last place, despite looking your absolute best and feeling your absolute best,
that can be really gut-wrenching.
Yeah.
I think there's an opportunity to reframe that because and again, it's almost like, those personality tests where they say you have to be as honest with yourself as possible. And at first you're like, I am being honest. And then you're like, okay, let me truly dig deep into my soul before I answer this question, marinate on it. And same thing with this. I think instead of losing weight or having weight as a goal, because, and this is my opinion, that's not a good idea going into a prep. I think if you're in a space where your thoughts and your goals are deeper than that, they're genuinely, I want to take control of my health, or I want to have a better relationship with my body. I want to be mindful about how I can control my body image and how I see myself. I want to do check-ins with myself. I want to work on giving myself credit. I want to work on eating enough food. I want to work on not feeling guilty when I treat myself with food. I think, competing can get a bad rep because you think of the body dysmorphia potential. I think that you're better set up for success with handling some of those dysmorphia thoughts that come into head, because we all have our own version. But I think that will set you up in the long run if you are passionate about having a better relationship with yourself and reminding yourself that that's the why, and reminding yourself that there will be days that you're not feeling too hot about your body. You feel like you're not doing enough. You're just doubting, if your progress is ever going to get there. But if you have a strong why, and if it's clearly just about you and not how you look, but how you feel in your relationship, then that's a good headspace to be in.
Yeah. Well, and I think you just hit the nail on the head right there, tying it back to what is success for you. Success for you may on the surface be that you want to lose 10 to 15 pounds. Success for you may be that you idolize Issa, and you want to be like her, right? But taking that deeper, and you said it best yourself, you want to have a better relationship with yourself. You want to look in the mirror and be proud of this physique that matches, the Maddie that's on the inside, or the image that you see yourself as. You want to actually match your outward appearance. That is fine. It is no different than losing 10 pounds, right? For some people, but this is deeper. And then when you get up on that stage and you have achieved that thing that you articulated as what does success look like for you, and it's ingrained in that deeper rooted why, the experience in and of itself, you may have achieved that 10 to 15 pound weight loss goal, but it's so much more. And that's where you see people coming back to the sport and doing this again and again and again, because they haven't latched onto such a surface level thing. If you think about it, if you're latching onto something that's surface level, you're also going to fall. It's like a bug, it can fall right back off, as opposed to being a leech.
Yeah. No, and it's not fair to yourself if that's the way you're thinking about it, no matter the outcome, because then you could get into a whole other episode at that point. But, there's the barriers, or I guess the expected response when a show is done, that if somebody has a superficial goal, everyone struggles at some point with what happens after a show, how you're looking, how you're feeling, how to handle, well, now what? So yeah, if your goal is something as simple in relative terms as an aesthetic goal, then you're just doing yourself a disservice. So
Yeah.
I think
Well,
people hear that ahead of time before stepping on stage, because I wish I could prevent some of the poor experiences people tell me they've had because they weren't prepped about these things. They weren't advised about some of the mental and emotional ways you can prepare yourself. And that's just as important as the gym and the diet. So yeah.
well, and I think there's a topic I want to touch on with you here, and that's going to be burnout. But I think that one of the big things that you just alluded to was girls who aren't prepared for the emotional, maybe the physical, but not so much the emotional side of this sport. And I think that some of that too can be attributed to the process that you're taking to get to the stage. I know a lot of people have watched my channel and they know that I've switched coaches. I have nothing bad to say about my previous coach, but I will say that it was a different approach. And I hear from a lot of girls who work with certain coaches where their expectation is met. Their expectation of the coach is that they're going to get a meal plan or macros. They're going to get their cardio. They're going to get their training, and they're off to the races, right? That it's that coach's job to get you to the stage. Right. But I don't know that a lot of coaches, and it's not their fault, necessarily have the capacity for getting to know, okay, who is Shannon beyond just Shannon the bodybuilder? Because you may know, but what happens when you're consistently checking in with a coach who's not reminding you of that girl, or who's not making sure that they're still cultivating and nourishing the other aspects of that girl, what happens is we start to forget about those aspects. Yeah. So we get to stage, we compete, we get done with show, and it's like this huge cathartic, like not in a good way, depression that sets in, and we find ourselves burnt out, right? We're like, oh my gosh, I lost so much of myself. I never want to go back and do that again. That was hell on earth. I want my life back.
Yeah.
Right? I want my marriage back, or I want my weekends with girlfriends, or my trips to the farmer's market, or I don't know, like my weekend trips to the beach, whatever it may be. I want that back. And it's like, but girl, you should have never lost that. But the thing is, you didn't have a coach who was necessarily making that part of the protocol.
Yeah. And it's tough because, coaches are people, right? Everyone's got different personalities, different barriers and hurdles that they've experienced. But it's tough because also if we don't share, or if we don't know, and part of this is my experience, sometimes you haven't yet assessed what you're feeling and what that means. So it can be hard to communicate that to your coach too, because someone could have a really outstanding empathetic coach, and maybe it says in the check-in box, any questions you have for me, how are things going for you? And if someone says, oh no, I'm fine, maybe put in there, I just felt off this week and I don't know why, or man, I really am starting to feel tired, or man, I'm struggling with life balance, or my relationship's struggling a little bit. Maybe just say those things, because maybe you don't understand what you're feeling yet, but you're just feeling blah. Like if someone asks you, how are you doing today? And internally you feel like you're lying.
Yeah.
I'm doing good. Maybe sit with that a little bit and then communicate it. You can even say, I don't know why, but these are the things I'm noticing. Is there something I can do? Because maybe they have a coach that can help, but we don't really think about that. We think they just want to see my body and if I look good.
Yeah. Well, I had an athlete last week who's in prep. She checked in with me and she said, one of her things was like, what's going on, or tell me about something that's going on in your life this upcoming week. She said, well, my husband's going out of town, so I'm going to be home with my kids. And I touched base with her and I was like, do you want workouts to do at home in your gym so you don't have to get like a sitter or leave, single momming with 2 under 2 basically? Yeah. Like, oh my gosh, yes, that would take, and it's like, but you have to look for those things,
right?
You have to look for the little like red flag bing bings to grab onto and make sure that you're cultivating the other identities, i.e. mom.
Mhm.
But I want to ask you, because I know you've experienced burnout in your career.
Mhm. Yeah.
But oh yeah, I hit a hot button there. But how have you been able to leverage the lessons that you've learned with managing burnout in your career and responding to that so you don't get burnt out in this sport?
Yeah. Well, I think things bleed into other areas of your life. And long and short, I was in a very low place at the beginning of last year. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there were things that were going really well in life, but there were things that it's like, all right, I went to school for 8 years, became a doctor, and I'm this close to just saying, you know what, I will work at Dutch Brothers and live on a dream at this point because it just, that's where I was at. But thankfully, that situation and getting to the sport really forced me to prioritize my health. You know, a lot of the advice I gave earlier, it's because I've been there and I had learned that advice. And it required me to learn things like saying no. Because if you think about it, just like in other professions, but my own, healthcare, when you ask people why do they do what they do, they say, I want to help people. They don't say, it makes me happy to help people. And the sport or the sport, the job is very much about bending over backwards and saying yes, which that's beautiful. But to what extent? And when I learned to say no, when I learned to think, okay, what are my limits right now? What are things that I'm just going to have to say no, even if there's no reason other than just I don't want to or I can't. And I applied that in the sport too. I mean, it's so easy to feel guilty, for instance, on the days that you're like, I just really need to be home.
Yeah.
I've worked out 6 days in a row. I'm supposed to go do some cardio or something, or maybe I got a lift left. And it can be really easy to say, oh, if I didn't do everything, I failed. But, you know, sometimes maybe my relationship needed watering that day, and that was more important. Or maybe my relationship with myself needed watering that day. Or, you know, so I think checking in with yourself and having those boundaries of what am I doing right? What can I do? What can't I do? What do I want to do?
Yeah.
What do I want to do? And if you have those routine moments with yourself, and um, I'll give a specific too, because I think that's really hard to apply if someone doesn't know where to start. So my phone, for instance, we talked about how we love being organized earlier.
Mhm.
So on my phone, on my notes app, I have a to-do list on there. And I used to be the person where I would just check off things and I'd say, oh, this feels so good. I'd check it off or I'd cross it out or I'd delete it. Well, the problem with that is at the end of the day, I would still have a list and all I'd look at is the fact that I still had stuff to do. So what I started doing is I also have a list above that that says what I accomplished. And I write down everything on there once things are done. And it can be as simple as, you know, I went to work today. I filled up my gas tank. I went to the gym. I will list cardio and lift separately. But that way, as far as burnout concerns, you are in the headspace more often than not about rewarding yourself and honoring where you're at. And that I think will help combat the burnout in the sport. If that makes
100%.
sense.
Wow, that was so beautifully said and such an important thing, I think, for people, even myself, to hear, is acknowledging, right, all that we accomplish day in and day out, just in our daily lives outside of this sport, but also within it. Remembering that we are in a sport, and I think we've talked about this, where you lose more than you win. So it's very, very easy to kind of sort of be on this like very stagnant. I mean, there can be years in your career where you're just going like this. There is no uphill.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not taking time to, as we talked about at the beginning of this call, articulate what success looks like for you at little road marks, that's a way of identifying what success looks like for you for the day.
Yeah.
You know, identifying those small micro wins or those small little achievements, because those things add up, and what they build is self-efficacy. And they build autonomy and pride and self-love and self-appreciation. And at the end of the day, that's what you really need to get you through. And the second thing that you talked about was the power of saying no. I want to take that and also run with it a little bit further.
Yeah.
I think it's more than just saying no. I do think that there are times, and there have been times in my personal career where I was being told, why don't we do this show? Why don't we do this show? Why don't we do this show? There's a reason why I spent 25 grand on shows last year, and why I was so burnt out. And I literally had to go to therapy during the 7-week period of me prepping for Irving. That was the shortest prep I've ever done, but I was so burnt out. And the reason was, not the only reason, but one of the pioneering reasons there was because I never told a coach, no, I don't think I want to do that show. Or wait. No and wait can be synonymous, right? Until you can kind of internally grapple with, is this going to serve me or hurt me? Is this what I think I should do or what I want to do?
Yeah.
And taking the no a little bit further, it's also okay. And I want to emphasize this because I've had far too many conversations this week in my DMs about it, to ask why. It is totally okay. I mean, I've asked my coaches why more times than I can count. And I will say, I like swallow a little golf ball every time I do,
Right.
even to this day, because I'm like,
excuse me,
sorry, I'm inquisitive, but
right,
no,
right.
I mean, to be able to not only speak from a, whether you're a coach yourself, and to be able to speak to your clients, and you never know what you're going to learn, but it's also important to know what you're putting in your body, why you're training your body, why does your coach want you to do that show? They may have a very valid reason. They may want you to get in front of a certain judging panel, and that may be part of your, your show progression, if you will. But then again, they might just say, well, it's another opportunity to get on stage.
Yeah.
So don't always take what your coaches are saying, whether it's, I want you to take Anavar or Prima, whatever it may be. Don't always just take it and run with the wind.
Right.
Just because they're an IFBB pro or they're an Olympian, whatever it may be, doesn't mean that they know what you need as an athlete. So be an advocate for yourself.
Yeah, that's true in all forms of life. I feel like whether you're in a medical doctor's office or you're at your job or
medical doctor's office for sure.
But how many times do we question why?
Yeah.
Or like, why am I taking this? Why are you prescribing this? Or, hey, is this okay to take with this medication?
Right. But why are we, why are we that way? Is it because we feel like, because we're the patient and they're the doctor, that they're superior, or because we're the athlete and they're this like high and mighty coach, that we can't use our voice? Because at the end of the day, if you think about your other relationships, right? Think about your husband or your boyfriend. If he does something or says like, hey babe, I think that we should go on a trip to Aruba. I'm sure you're not going to be like, why? But you might ask like, babe, we just bought a house or we just had a wedding. We're still fine. You have no problem asking why to those people. And I would argue that you should be just as close with your coaches as you are with your spouse or your partner. That relationship requires a lot of trust. So ask.
I'm laughing because I'm like, yep, they see my booty every single week. So we
should
be tight.
You show them your top. I've nip slipped my coaches more times than I can count. So listen, if they can see me like that, then I can also ask them why they're taking my cardio down or adding another 10 grams of fat.
Right.
And I think that's a way to avoid the burnout, is because you're educating yourself along the journey as opposed to being a puppet and just sort of going with it, right? By asking why and educating yourself, it's almost like buying stock. You're buying stock in the sport, in the process, and you're ingraining yourself into that. Yeah. But if you're just kind of, skating by,
right,
then you're never going to feel like you're a part of it. You're going to feel like you're a puppet of it.
Yeah. I want to be an active participant.
Sure. So, you took the words right out of my mouth. You've talked quite a bit in this podcast about your husband. So I can't relate because I'm single as a Pringle. But I want to hear from you. Your husband is not a competitor, correct?
Absolutely not.
Okay, perfect. Perfect.
He would look at you and be like, hell no.
I love that. I love that. So I always tell myself that I can never in this life of mine be with a competitor, but here I am, like only talking to competitors. But let's talk about you and your husband. And what are some of your words of wisdom or advice for those who maybe feel like it's tough to manage, because you are not only managing a relationship, but starting to cultivate and plant the seed of a marriage throughout prep.
Yeah.
But I would love for you to also talk not just about prep, but about being a bodybuilder.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, we actually did a whole episode on this called Prepping Your Relationship. And because it really was such an adjustment, not just for me, but for my partner, because we've been together for a little over 5 years and we've lived together for 4. We just got married in October of 2023. So we're very newly married.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah. So, I mean, he obviously met me before I was a bodybuilder, and he was with me when I took the first steps, and he knew my why. He was with me on my days where I was really hangry, or, just different emotions I'd never experienced before.
He was ready for Bridezilla, pregnant Shannon. I mean, what can he handle now?
Yeah. I mean, my first year, especially because I didn't know really anybody in the sport. I didn't know how to articulate what the process was. I'd never been through it. And that's partially why I'm so passionate about the podcast and the community I've created, because you don't know until you know. Yeah. And it's so helpful when someone just tells you what's normal and how to feel. And sometimes if the only person you know is your coach and you don't even realize you have those questions, it's just really overwhelming, and it is what it is. But yeah, so it was a process for both him and I, was my point. And the biggest thing that got us through and continues to get us through these seasons is, it sounds so cheesy, but communication. And just doing check-ins like, hey, how do you think we're doing? How are you doing? Obviously I'm limited on foods right now. How can we still feel like we are having a quote normal dating life with us? Like, for instance, we love going to Majestic movie theaters. It's one of the movie theater brands here. We just love big movie people. And I had to tell him one day, I was like, by the way, I hope you know, I don't expect you to not get the spicy piccoli pizza next to me at the movies. Like, this is my decision to go through prep. I'm okay supporting you and your food. So I think I almost had to give him the okay of, you don't have to eat and live exactly like I am. And I'm not going to question or judge on what you're eating. I'm not going to expect you to be restricted just because I'm making the choice to be restricted. So I think, for one, being okay that it might look different, because that can be really hard when you're in close corridors for both of you to be living very opposite lives when it comes to food and workouts. I've structured my workouts to where I work out in the morning. That way at night, I don't feel like I'm taking time away from our alone time. And I think just checking in with your partner about, what needs do you have and how can they best fulfill them, and vice versa. And the biggest struggle for him, I think, was the body dysmorphia, because for him, he's like, you look great. You always look great. Right. And I can see the progress. And it's going to be really hard, whether you're a bodybuilder or not, but taking the feedback, taking the compliment and realizing they mean it, and not saying, no, I don't, or, oh, but look at my tum-tum. It doesn't have abs yet. He calls it tum-tum. I hate when I accidentally call it that in public. But, so, just trying to realize that this is your partner and they're there for you, and, they're your supporter. If you're having a bad day, it has nothing to do with them. So learning to dissociate that and learning what you need when you are having that mood. Do you need to leave the room? Do you need them to listen and not fix? And what do they need? Because they might also be really struggling with their reality with you looking different. So
I was just about to say, it's just like love languages. I feel like one of the the first questions when like a guy's getting to know you is like, oh, what is your love language? Right. And you're like, oh, words of affirmation,
Right.
acts of service, whatever it may be. Guys are always physical touch, but whatever it may be, it doesn't matter what love language you have. It's a matter of if you've heard theirs and you can demonstrate love to them in that way. In this vein, it's similar to or analogous to your partner is probably going to be over the moon excited for you on this journey. And they're probably going to be asking, babe, what can I do for you? Can I cook you your rice? Or do you want someone to go to the gym with you? But how often have you stopped and asked, or not maybe asked, but given them permission to not change their lives to accommodate your bodybuilding?
Right. Yep. And that's tough
because partners are gonna, I dated a guy for a little while who, he was a firefighter and he would get up at like 4 a.m. He would get off shift, a 24-hour shift, and come with me and get on the Stairmaster. And then when things ended, he was like, I basically did your prep with you. Partially my fault though. I never gave him permission to say, listen, J-Man, you don't need to get off from the fire department and come do cardio with me just because I'm doing it at 4 a.m. I appreciate it, but I can do this on my own. I chose this.
Yeah, I think a lot of partners are nervous about, and family too, family, friends, this applies to all relationships. I mean, people they want to be supportive, so they might be tiptoeing a little bit. And, even like with friends, we'll say that for people who aren't married.
Yeah.
They might feel like they can't invite you, or they might feel bad. So I think just communicating, hey, everyone, don't feel bad. Like, I'm going to bring my food. I just genuinely enjoy being in your presence, or I appreciate being included. It brings me joy to take a break and just catch up with all of you and hear about your lives, because sometimes it can also be exhausting when everyone's asking you, how's it going? Tell me about it. And you're like, I don't want to think about it right now.
Yep.
So you have to really learn to be vocal, not only with yourself, but with others about what you need, what would make you feel supported. And then just trying to also be there for them, even though you are busy. Just, do what you can, whether that's, sending out texts of good luck on your job interview this week while you're on the Stairmaster. I use my cardio time to catch up with people. So yeah, it's really intentional, and it's tough because it's a very major life change you're going through, and it's really overwhelming and really stressful, but it can be done. You just have to take baby steps.
Yeah, you really emphasized here the importance of relationships. And I will say I probably racked up the most phone minutes in my prep. And when I would go take my walks, I would call a family member or a friend and catch up with them. It's okay for your communication and your interactions with people to look different, but making sure that you are maintaining, if not continuing to like cultivate new relationships and former relationships while you're in a prep, as opposed to shutting down and isolating, is paramount.
And even say if someone who's listening, they're like, shoot, I've been really bad at that. Whoever you just thought of right now, shoot them a text, be like, hey, I just want to say I appreciate you. I know that life has been busy, and I hope you know that I think of you. And, just verbalize that, because that's still watering the relationship. You may not actively have time to give them, or, be able to, I don't know, be able to do some of what you're wanting to do. But even just let them know you're thinking of them and you appreciate them, that can go a long way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the same in a relationship, right? Your partner likely has lowered expectations of you in a prep. One of those things, and I can relate, is libido, right? Like your drive to want to be intimate with your partner, it ain't there. And so it's helpful to have conversations about that kind of stuff. But in kind of piggybacking on what you just said, bring your boyfriend home a steak. Like, there's other ways. Guys, yes, they love physical touch, but there's other ways to demonstrate love and acts of service and kindness and compassion for your partner. It's temporary. It looks a little bit different, but don't get down on yourself, right? When you feel that type of way, you just have to get creative, just like you would with a friendship with a girlfriend.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, so one of my last questions for you has to do with your background in PT. So I know that you're a physical therapist, and I know you did a podcast on this too. That was a fantastic one about like the 7 tips from or being a physical therapist. But I wanted you to draw upon maybe 2 or 3 like things that aren't really commonplace for especially bodybuilders to like consider with their training or their recovery.
Yeah. So I would say the first one's going to be a biased piece of advice. But it's something that I don't know if personally I know of anybody in my circle that has at least vocalized that they do it, unless they're a physical therapist. And it's a waste of a resource that's there. I would say if you were a bodybuilder, almost every single PT, outpatient orthopedic place, and I work at a cash-based facility, so mine's a little bit different, but we offer similar things. Go get a screening and just communicate. And when I say screening, you don't need a referral. In most states, you don't need a doctor referral to go see a DPT. And when you go in, you can just say, hey, I want one of the free 15-minute screenings. I honestly just want to check up, just like I would at my 6-month checkup at the dentist. How are things looking? And do that before and after your season, or even during, because really it's just good insight onto, because that's our job as a PT. We assess risk. We assess for potential, even if there's no active pains. I can tell you when something is off or when something is significantly weaker. I can tell with your posture. I can tell a lot by just watching you stand there, sit, get out of a chair. It's like my superpower. The airport, if you sit with me for an hour, it's really entertaining.
I'm sure you're watching me on this chair leaning sideways, like, girl, sit up straight with your scoliosis.
Oh
no, but
I can turn it off. But yeah, I mean, just go get a free 15-minute screening. And
that's not something either where you're going to say, this is going to hinder you from prepping. It could just be, here is something you might want to do to prevent injury, or something that you might want to add in or cross train with.
Yeah. And that's actually something I do. So because I meet a lot of people virtually, I will do virtual screenings, and then I will create virtual programs for people. So if someone wants just say, hey, Shannon, I just want some PT essentials from you based on what you saw. And I will say, here you go. Here's when I want you to do them. Here's how many I want you to do them. Here's all the cues, because I'm very particular. It's like gym fails. You know how you see how someone does a movement and you're like, ah, no.
Yeah.
So even if someone doesn't have one available to them physically, they can message me virtually. Sorry, it's cloudy over here. So the lights are going like,
oh,
because I would rather someone at least have that as a resource, just a programming from a medical professional. I'm not giving advice, but that can do you so much good before you have an injury, because most people, they're like, oh yeah, I've been putting off my lateral epicondylitis. I got tennis elbow, had it for 6 months, or yeah, there's just the achy thing, but it doesn't bother me that bad. So I'm just gonna,
yeah,
wait for it to bother you.
Yeah.
Message somebody. So yeah, I would say that's tip number 1. I guess that was kind of multiple tips in one, but get a free screening for sure as 1A is don't wait for it to bother you. And yeah, I mean, I kind of touched on some things I would advise somebody as a physical therapist earlier, like making sure, you are good internally. But another one, it's not necessarily a PT oriented one, but it does have to do with honoring your progress. And this is going to be a 2-parter for number 2 is take the pictures. I know we feel like gym douches, especially if you're early to gym photos. Take the pictures and write it down, because I promise you a year from now, you will say, whoa, look at how much I accomplished. Or I remember I said I was feeling like this on that day, and this is what I looked like. Wow. Yeah. Look at how much good I did. And I think that that's something that is just as important as a physical tip, because just like anything else in life, it is so easy when we are right there. We can't quite see all of our progress, but once we've had space from it, we're like, okay, I need to work on giving myself more credit because look at how much I did do and look how awesome I am. Look how strong I am.
Well, you think about it too. It's no different than a lifestyle athlete. And I work with a ton of lifestyle athletes. I have one lady who's been with us for 6 months, remarkable progress.
Mhm.
But when she first started with us, she wasn't really like perfectly adherent to her macros. She was eating like 1,300 calories, the usual, right? What we see a lot. And as she progressed on her 6 month journey, she was building on her achievements, and thus her area or her criteria for what constituted success for her, it was more specific. It was higher level, right? As she graduated through the program. Well, at the end, she was like, I feel like I've learned a lot about my body. I've learned about a lot about food, but I kind of still wish I looked a little bit different. And I went into our app and I put the pictures side by side for her. And she goes, oh my gosh, it's a completely different human.
Mm-hmm.
No different than we see our bodies every single day, right? In the morning when you get up, at night before you go to bed, and hopefully you filthy monsters, everybody takes showers, but it's like you always see yourself. You're so used to seeing yourself. In fact, a lot of times, even your spouse, it might be used to seeing you. And so you might not really be getting this validation or, this encouragement in this recognition for how far you've came. So aside from just looking at like, pictures and whatnot, like I like that you noted documenting how you were feeling on that journey, because I know that at the beginning of my journey, I was feeling like there's times where you might write down like, wow, this is so hard. I'm doing, 20 minutes of cardio a day. And then you get up to 60 and you're like, I would do anything to do 40. It's like, and so to remember and to have those things to also compare to, makes, kind of tying this all together, makes that why and that achievement and that word that we've talked about so much, success, so much greater, and the likelihood of getting burnt out because you're so hard on yourself, it minimizes that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And you just made me think of my third recommendation. I would say, I don't know how I got there. It just popped in. But I would say as a provider, and this is for bodybuilders, but for people in general, is in my opinion, most case scenario, I mean, there's some things I won't apply, but if there is an absolute that's given to you from your provider or from your coach, or run. So what I mean by that is if someone says, oh, you've got a bad knee, so you can't do squats. Those are very extreme verbiages. I would never say to somebody they've got a bad back or a bad knee or that they can't do something. We might have to modify things, or might have to change things or progress or regress things. Or you'll say, oh, you always have to foam roll only at this point before or after your workout, or you can never do this movement. I'm not a big fan of that.
Cardio has to be fasted.
Right. Because what works for one doesn't work for another. So I think whether it's a coach, whether it's a medical provider, if someone is telling you an absolute, run. I think, I'm all about empowering people and using positive language. So if any of these sound like things that you're going through and it doesn't make you feel great, or you feel like you don't understand, like we talked about the why earlier, you don't understand why you're doing something, question that, or maybe seek another provider, or just get some advice, speak to people in the community, because chances are, even all of my patients, I will hardly ever say you cannot ever do this, or you will always have to do that, or make comments about their body in bad terms, which is terrible. People do that all the time, and I'm like, please don't do that to your patients or to your athletes. So that's another tip. Just keep that in mind. Find another provider, find another coach if that's what you're going through.
Super, super helpful. Well, thank you so much for taking this time on your Saturday and for hanging out with me for a little while. And oh my gosh, I feel like I just had a therapy session, like sitting here and soaking up all of your knowledge, and you're just hearing about your journey. You are an incredible, incredible person.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I really enjoyed talking with you too. It's that's the best part I feel like of podcasting is you just get to listen to people and connect with people and hear their stories. And it's been really nice to get to know you. It's not just your Instagram profile. So now I'm like, wow, I've got a friend in Florida.
Yeah, you do. Well, so next time you're here for Amateur O, you
Yeah,
can I'll come support you. I'll come root you on.
please do. You said your next show, you know when your show date is, correct? Or are you
Yes,
announcing your
I
date?
am. I have. My next show is going to be the Clash here in Orlando. So happy that I'm doing a show in Orlando. So it's the Clash series show on March the 31st.
I will be putting all of the vibes.
Thank you guys for tuning in this week. Your support on this channel truly means the absolute world to me. As this channel grows and I have had an opportunity now to meet many of your beautiful faces, not only in person at conferences and shows, but also just over on my Instagram page. It's been such an honor and such a blessing having such impactful conversations with you guys. So if you're not already following me over on my IG page, go head over to Madsmichiefitness. Go reach out to me, because if you don't, I'm going to reach out to you. But I hope that you guys had some key takeaways from this week's video. Next week, we should be back to, I would say, a normal vlogging, if you will. Just sort of documenting my prep. There hasn't been a lot of changes. We have been pushing more food, but we're about 7 weeks out from my show, so we are coasting slow and steady, but things should start picking up here soon, so I should have some juicy updates for you guys next week. If you haven't already subscribed, I know it's tough to hit that button, right? We all go watch our YouTubers, but we just can't hit that button. Please do me a favor and hit that button. It means the world to me that you guys are watching and that you're continuing to come back. It lets me know that you support the channel. So go ahead and hit that subscribe. If any of you guys are in the middle of your season, I'm sending all the love and well wishes your way. If you guys are interested in prepping or working with a coach, hell, you don't even have to be a bikini competitor. We are here for it. Our mission is always to educate, inspire, and empower each and every one of our athletes, all while keeping their internal health top of mind. The application link for Team MPowered is always down below. We also have a new assistant coach, and she's got some different rates, if you know what I mean. So whether you're interested in working with myself or Shelby, there's a spot to fill that out on the inquiry form. So I hope to meet each and every one of you real soon. I hope you're having a great week, and I'll talk to you guys next Sunday.